Now to take this further, we are being joined by our correspondent Kaldane Ongo, and also for perspective, writer and political analyst Kim Heller is joining us live. Kaldane, if I could quickly start with you, how has the voter turnout been so far and what are the voters saying?
Well, Ananya, here in Johannesburg, it's just gone past 4:30 p.m. There's less than 5 hours until voting closes. But looking at the numbers around Johannesburg, where I've been driving around various polling stations, it doesn't look like it's going to end anytime soon. At least here where I'm currently, there's a queue here still going strong. Early I was in Johannesburg CBD, the heart of Johannesburg. The queue there were thousands of people were still in line. So I really do not know whether people will, whether the 9 p.m. deadline mark will be extended or not by the IEC. But of course, that's a question that we'll be throwing at them at 7 p.m. press briefing that they'll be having. But what the IEC earlier in the day, in the press briefing, they said that initially they had estimated about 66% of the registered voters may turn out, but they said that that number is likely to go higher. So many people, actually, some of the volunteers that I've been speaking to at these various polling stations say that, you know, elderly people saying this is the first time actually in many years that they've seen number of people turning out to vote, whether be it in CBD or townships or even suburbs, to answer to your question. So many young people actually in Johannesburg CBD, that earlier where I was speaking to them, they said, you know, they are going to make their voice heard. It's time for change. But also there were some other youngsters in townships actually telling me they're not going to cast their votes because no matter which party comes, their life is not going to change. But going back to your question about voter turnout, like I mentioned, IEC has estimated the voter turnout is likely to go higher than the initial estimates of 66%. And remember, as you mentioned in your read, that there are at least 28 million people have registered to vote. Ananya?
Right, Kaldane, it's always good to hear when the youngsters are actively tracking what's happening in the political arena of the country. Ms. Heller, if I could quickly come to you now. ANC's Cyril Ramaphosa, of course, seems to be very optimistic about the results of this election. But what is your analysis? Do you think this election has actually put to test, in a way, Nelson Mandela's legacy?
Thank you for the opportunity to speak on the channel. I think that the ANC is going to get just below the 50% mark. And that's a significant dip from its overwhelming mandate, as you were saying, in 1994. We've seen a progressive dip in the ANC, and hope amongst the electorate that the ANC would herald in a better life has not manifest. And listening to the voters that you interviewed, they speak about corruption, about unemployment, about lost opportunities, about no electricity. And that has become the everyday of South Africa. So Cyril Ramaphosa, as the current president, has fared very badly. In fact, it's under his administration that the ANC has had its lowest polling. And I think we're going to see the results of this being extremely low, but perhaps not as low as some of the analysts are saying. I think it's going to be in the region of about 48%. Nonetheless, that's an extremely significant dip in the support of the ANC.
Right. Ms. Heller, stay with us. Kaldane, if I could quickly come back to you. Anti-incumbency is usually common in any election, not just to South Africa, but in any country. It's very easy to blame the government of sorts about the contemporary issues. But what other choice do the voters in South Africa have at this point?
Well, Ananya, if you go around in the country, around people speaking, whether you speak to young people of the country, whether you speak to the elderly, everybody has the same thing to say. They are fed up. I know, in many a times they say, do not blame the government. It's your duty also to do certain things. Do not rely on the government for everything. South Africa's government actually, they have announced grants, a housing grant. There's a child grant for, people that cannot afford. But at this given point of time, it seems like the citizens are fed up of this free handouts too. Young people, as you say, they say that they were born after apartheid. They're born into the democracy. But for the last 3 decades, they haven't seen improvement. In fact, the support base for ANC has been dwindling over the last 30 years. So as the expert Kim Heller explained there, saying, Cyril Ramaphosa, under his leadership, ANC support base actually fell to 57% in the last elections. And this year, even if ANC comes into power, even if they do not fall below 40%, they will be forced to go into coalition with smaller parties. Now, the big question, will that actually work for South Africa? Will there be more infights? Currently, this is something some of the experts say that they don't see it working at all. Or will the main opposition party, that's the Democratic Alliance, if they get a majority, if they get, quite a few number of voters from the last elections, which they got 20%, if they go into a coalition with other parties, what will happen then? So the question now is about, if at all ANC loses the majority, it will be forced to go into coalition. So everyone is speculating what happens to the country now. Will there be an improvement, or will it get worse?
Ms. Heller, quickly picking on what my correspondent has been saying, the what-ifs of this election result. Give us a global perspective. What can the election result in South Africa this year actually impact on the global scale?
I think it will impact quite largely, and especially if we look at the African continent. I think if the ANC had to fall, it's almost like another blight on the African liberation project. We will see shifts in economic and foreign policy. I mean, one most notable would be if the DA and ANC had to merge, we would probably see a relaxed stance on the Israel-Palestine crisis. And we'd probably see even a move away from BRICS if a centrist type coalition comes into play, which I think is the most likely scenario. And we might see in that situation the US and Europe gaining a foothold in the continent via South Africa, because they've been ousted out by some of the newer African leaders. So I think it will have implications in terms of the geopolitics of the continent and in terms of the future of BRICS. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Kim Heller, thank you so much for your insights. Good to have you. Kale Nongmu, thank you so much for getting us all those updates from Johannesburg. Wow. For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.